I'm speaking to you from the Camino Hermitage, high above Port Susan in the northwest on Camino Island. We just went last week to a different hermitage, one with great spiritual vibrations and energy, which was the Hermitage, as Yogananda called it, in the little seaside town of Encinitas, California. You may know the story that earlier in his life, before he came to America, he kept having visions or would come to his mind the sight of buildings, several buildings, one of which was to be, in later decades, the Hermitage there in Encinitas. Now, after he established his domicile in the Los Angeles area at Mount Washington, he would, from time to time, take drives. You know, those were the days where, even in my upbringing, the days when people would go out for a Sunday drive. Remember the phrase Sunday drivers? They were driving leisurely along, enjoying driving and looking around and so forth. My parents used to like to look at homes for sale. They never bought anything, but they liked that. So Yogananda would drive down the coast on Highway 1 in California, known these days and more recent decades as the Pacific Coast Highway, or PCH. And along the PCH then, as he would drive, he had already identified a certain inclination, call it a certain orientation towards that part of the coastline. I don't know how much he said to his fellow friends and disciples there in terms of his interest, but I think he, as I recall the story, he made it pretty well known that he had in mind a seaside hermitage. So anyway, during his absence to India and Europe in 1935 and 36, his closest, most advanced disciple, Rajarsi Janakananda, James J. Lynn from Kansas City, had purchased the land and had constructed there, with the able assistance of one of the nuns, Durga Mata, a beautiful seaside hermitage with red clay tiles, such as is the custom in Mediterranean and in Spanish California. And it sits up on a bluff overlooking the beautiful Pacific Ocean, with a beach down below, which later became called and now is officially known as Swami's Beach. Anyway, so that's where we went, and over the decades, a beautiful garden area has been developed with little walkways and flowers and overlook points to the ocean. There was once a beautiful temple there that was built in the late 30s, but unfortunately it crashed into the ocean, I think during World War II. So it's no longer there, but there's a plaque there that describes it was there. So Padma and I, for her birthday, and with money received for her birthday from friends, spent about 4 days down in Encinitas. We stayed at a local hotel nearby and would spend the day meditating there in the Encinitas gardens. And I wanted to quote to you Sister Gyanamata, Edith Bissett from Seattle, had moved there, I don't remember exactly, early 30s perhaps. Not to that, it wasn't built. She moved to Mount Washington. And she became a nun there, and one of somebody who Yogananda trusted spiritually. And when he went to India, he entrusted to her the role of spiritual director for the small band of monastics. And in the book Conversations with Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda writes these words: Yogananda once described Sister Gyanamata, his most advanced woman disciple, in these words: I have searched her life and found in it not a single sin, even of thought. Now, that's very difficult to imagine. I have searched her soul and found not a single sin, not even in thought. Well, if any of us can possibly imagine such a soul, and imagine that there at the Hermitage in Encinitas, she lived for many, many years, forget exactly, 30s and 40s and early 50s when she passed away. So she left her body there in the Hermitage. She lived there for a very long time. Yogananda wrote portions of the autobiography in his room in the Hermitage. And Rajarsi Yogananda from Kansas City during those years would spend extended periods of time in a room he had there in the Hermitage, and then came to live there in the latter years of Yogananda's life, and then after Yogananda's life he stayed there. And so, and then the other advanced disciple from Detroit, Yogacharya Oliver Black, would come for shorter periods of time. In any case, as I was meditating there, I would try to feel, and I would visualize and try to feel the presence of an avatar of Paramhansa Yogananda writing the autobiography, of Sister Gyanamata, Rajarsi Yogananda, especially those. And imagine them maybe having a meal together, chatting together, sitting in the sunshine overlooking the ocean there. There's a story also in that book, Conversations with Yogananda, that Yogananda and somebody else, another disciple, were walking around, and they came around the back of the house there, the Hermitage, where the lawn is overlooking the ocean, and they came upon Rajarsi meditating in samadhi, Yogananda said. And he said, shh, to his companion as they tiptoed around. And later, Yogananda whispered to the other, you don't know what spiritual blessings accrue to this work by just one person in samadhi. Well, he was in Nirvikalpa samadhi, so in any case, my point is the spiritual vibrations of such a place. You know, when a soul enters samadhi, they tear the fabric of space and time back. They peel it back, and infinity descends. And it creates kind of that tear in the fabric is something that is all but permanent. I'll say permanent because if some people recognize that blessing and come repeatedly like a spring and drink from the waters of that infinite source, then the tear in the fabric remains. If it were to be wholly forgotten, as I'm sure has happened in many places throughout the world, down through the ages, then I think the fabric probably mends itself, so to speak. But at this point in history, so early, there at the Hermitage, I think more even than his headquarters in Mount Washington. I say that, I'm not sure why I say that, but it's a bigger building, a bigger property. Many people live there as opposed to just few. Gyanamata did live there for some years before the Hermitage was completed. Yogananda certainly did, but he was often out traveling and so forth. So I don't want to make comparisons, but for the general public, Mount Washington is just not as accessible as the gardens in Encinitas. And it's much smaller, it's much more personal. It's, to my mind, jam-packed with high spiritual vibrations. You know, Lake Shrine up in Pacific Palisades near Santa Monica is also a beautiful place to go, but none of these great disciples ever lived there. So it is infused with the vibrations of Yogananda, and I do love going there, but I don't think there's anything that compares with the Encinitas Hermitage, with one possible exception, which is the Crypt and Forest Lawn in Glendale, California, not far from Mount Washington, where Yogananda's physical remains are interred. That too has and you can put your head right up to the vault. So it has very powerful spiritual vibrations. So the crypt in Glendale and Encinitas Gardens are the two places where you don't have to go to India. These two places in sunny California represent a very powerful vortex of energy. And I think on reflection, I would say the Hermitage is top, because Yogananda's body, though it's right there, is simply his body. And although it emanates powerful vibrations, certainly, I don't think anything could compare with the living presence of Yogananda, Gyanamata, and Rajasi, especially those three, there at the Encinitas Gardens. I'm told, I've heard, that there are some occasions on which the public is admitted into the Hermitage and can walk past Yogananda's room and Gyanamata's room and Rajasi's room, I suppose. But that's so rare, I don't know what to offer. But meditating in the gardens, which are, you can see the house right there, is something I highly recommend to everyone. And for those who can't go to energized pilgrimage spots throughout the world, especially in India, anyone can get to Encinitas, California. And this is truly a sacred shrine, and I feel greatly blessed for having had the opportunity. Okay, well, that's it for today.